You think cast iron was just cookware? Think again. In black kitchens across the 1950s South, these heavy skillets held secrets passed down through generations, techniques that turned simple ingredients into meals no modern pan could ever replicate. Here are 30 cast iron frying techniques black grandmas swore by. Seasoning the skillet with bacon grease was ritual passed from mother to daughter in black kitchens throughout the 1950s South. After every use, grandmothers wiped their cast iron clean with a cloth, never soap, then rubbed warm bacon grease across the surface while the pan still held heat. This created a natural coating that deepened with every meal. The grease filled tiny pores in the iron, preventing rust and creating a glossy finish that announced years of careful tending. Children watched closely, understanding that a well-seasoned skillet was family treasure. Some pans had been seasoned for decades, their surfaces smoother than any modern coating. The grease added subtle depth to everything cooked afterward, meaning eggs carried traces of yesterday's breakfast. This technique transformed ordinary iron into heirloom vessels. The cold pan stock for chicken defied conventional wisdom, but delivered perfect results every time. Black grandmothers placed seasoned chicken pieces into a cold cast iron skillet with solid shortening, then turned on the heat. As the pan warmed slowly, the fat rendered gradually, allowing the coating to set before the fierce sizzle began. This prevented flour from falling off and ensured the crust adhered perfectly. The chicken fried itself as temperature climbed, developing deep golden color without burning. Kitchens filled with gentle popping that grew louder as heat intensified. Children learned to judge doneness by ear as much as sight. This method required trust and patience with the slow build, but it produced crispier, more evenly cooked chicken than any hot start method could achieve. Double frying for extra crispy results was a technique black grandmothers used when nothing less than perfection would do. The first fry cooked food through at moderate temperature, sealing moisture and setting the crust. Then pieces rested on wire racks while oil heated higher. The second fry lasted only minutes, but transformed the exterior into something shatteringly crisp while the inside stayed tender. This method worked especially well for chicken and fish destined for Sunday dinner tables. The resting period allowed steam to escape, preventing sogginess that plagued single fry methods. Grandmothers timed both stages precisely, knowing seconds mattered. The extra effort showed in every bite, the crust crackling loudly between teeth. Children fought over the crispiest pieces, understanding this food represented extra love. The grease-saving ritual was sacred practice in black kitchens where nothing went to waste. After frying, grandmothers let grease cool slightly, then strained it through cheesecloth into ceramic crocks kept beside the stove. This collected grease contained concentrated flavor from countless meals, bacon, chicken, fish, all mingling into liquid gold. The containers were never washed, only replenished, creating layers of seasoning that deepened over months. When cooking began, a spoonful of saved grease went into the skillet first, adding depth that fresh oil could never provide. Children understood this murky fat represented economy and flavor combined. The ritual continued daily without fanfare, simply part of kitchen rhythm. Modern cooks might cringe, but this technique delivered taste that made even simple vegetables memorable. Preheating low and slow was essential wisdom that separated experienced cooks from beginners in black kitchens of the 1950s. Grandmothers never rushed their cast iron, understanding that heavy pans needed time to heat evenly across their entire surface. A skillet placed over high flame developed hot spots that burned food in patches. Instead, the pan went over low heat for 15 minutes, the iron gradually absorbing warmth until every inch reached the same temperature. Only then would the flame increase. Children learned patience watching this process. The evenly heated surface meant chicken browned uniformly, cornbread developed consistent crust, and nothing stuck. This technique protected the seasoning too, preventing thermal shock that could damage the finish. The slow approach extended the pan's life across generations. The bread test for oil temperature was how Black grandmothers knew exactly when their grease was ready without any thermometer. A small cube of stale bread dropped into hot fat told the whole story. If it sank and sat motionless, the oil needed more time. If it browned too quickly, the heat was too high. But when that bread cube floated immediately, sizzled steadily, and turned golden in about 60 seconds, the grease was perfect for frying. This technique had been passed down through generations who never owned thermometers. Grandmothers could also read oil by watching its surface shimmer and ripple. Children learned to recognize that particular sizzle sound that meant perfect temperature. The bread test was simple, reliable, and cost nothing. Proof that good cooking came from observation rather than equipment. Flour dredging in paper bags was the mess-free technique Black grandmothers perfected for coating chicken, fish, and pork chops. Seasoned flour went into a large brown paper bag along with pieces of meat. The bag was folded closed, then shaken vigorously until every piece wore an even coat. Children often helped with the shaking, turning kitchen work into something playful. The paper absorbed excess moisture while distributing flour evenly without creating countertop disaster. When finished, the bag went straight into trash, leaving nothing to wash. The technique worked because confined space and agitation coated every surface. Some grandmothers added secret spice blends to the flour, creating proprietary mixtures that defined their signature fried foods. The paper bag method was practical genius that delivered perfectly coated results. The Splatter shield with pot lids was practical protection Black grandmothers used against hot grease burns while monitoring their frying food. A lid held at an angle over the skillet deflected spitting oil away from hands and arms while allowing steam to escape and letting cooks watch browning progress. This technique required skill. Holding the lid too close trapped steam and made food soggy, while holding it too far offered little protection. Grandmothers developed steady hands from years of practice, able to flip chicken one-handed while the other held the shield. Children were warned repeatedly about grease burns and taught this defensive technique before being allowed near the stove. The pot lid method also caught grease vapor, keeping kitchen walls cleaner. Every kitchen already had one. Skillet cornbread crust technique created that distinctive crispy bottom that made cast iron cornbread legendary in Black kitchens. The secret began with heating the empty skillet in a hot oven until it practically glowed, then adding generous bacon grease that immediately smoked. Batter went in next, hitting that screaming hot surface with a dramatic sizzle. Contact with intensely heated fat created an instant crust on the bottom while the top remained soft. As cornbread baked, that bottom crust turned deep golden brown, almost caramelized, with a crunch that shattered against teeth. The technique required confidence. Hesitation meant uneven crust or batter that stuck. Grandmothers moved quickly, having performed this ritual countless times. Children learned by watching, understanding the sizzle meant everything was working. Buttermilk soaking before frying was the tenderizing secret that made Black grandmothers' fried chicken legendary across the South. Chicken pieces went into bowls of tangy buttermilk for hours or overnight, the acid working slowly to break down tough fibers while adding subtle flavor. The buttermilk also helped flour coating adhere better, creating thicker crust that stayed put during frying. Some grandmothers added hot sauce or garlic to their buttermilk baths. Children would peer into refrigerators at bowls of soaking chicken, anticipating the meal to come. When soaked pieces met seasoned flour, the wet surface grabbed coating eagerly. The science was simple. Acid tenderizes protein, but results seemed like magic. This patient technique separated Sunday dinner chicken from everyday meals. The resting period after frying was crucial knowledge Black grandmothers understood instinctively. Fried foods pulled straight from hot grease were good, but those allowed to rest on wire racks for several minutes reached another level. During this pause, the crust continued to crisp as residual heat escaped while juices redistributed evenly through the meat. Cutting into chicken too soon released precious moisture that should have stayed locked within. The resting period also allowed excess grease to drip away, making each bite cleaner and crunchier. Children learned patience watching their grandmothers hold back the family from grabbing pieces too quickly. That waiting time transformed good fried food into perfect fried food. The technique required self-control but rewarded patience handsomely. Lard versus shortening debates divided Black kitchens throughout the 1950s South, with grandmothers defending their preferred frying fat fiercely. Lard rendered from hog fat delivered richer flavor and higher smoke points, creating crispier crusts with subtle pork undertones. Many families rendered their own during hog killing season, storing it in crocks for year-round use. Shortening like Crisco offered convenience without the work of rendering, plus it stayed solid without refrigeration. Some grandmothers mixed both, combining lard's flavor with shortening's stability. The choice depended on economics. Rural families with fresh pork favored lard, while urban cooks appreciated shortening's availability. Children grew up believing their grandmother's choice was the only correct one. The flip once rule governed fried chicken in Black kitchens, where grandmothers understood that constant turning ruined the crust. Each piece went into hot grease and stayed put until the bottom side turned deep golden brown, usually 8 to 10 minutes depending on thickness. Only then did the chicken get flipped, cooking another 8 minutes on the second side. Lifting and checking released heat, extended cooking time, and risked the coating separating from the meat. The patience required was considerable, but the reward was chicken with an unbroken crust on both sides. Children watching at the stove learned to trust the process rather than fidgeting with food. Grandmothers could tell doneness by sound alone, the sizzle changing pitch as moisture cooked away. This single flip discipline separated masters from amateurs. Crowding prevention in the skillet was fundamental wisdom that Black grandmothers enforced strictly. Putting too many pieces into hot grease at once dropped the oil temperature dramatically, resulting in soggy food that absorbed the fat instead of crisping properly. Each piece needed space around it for heat to circulate and steam to escape. Grandmothers typically fried in batches, sometimes taking over an hour to complete enough chicken for a large family. The temptation to rush was strong, especially with hungry children waiting, but experienced cooks knew shortcuts produce inferior results. They'd rather work longer and serve perfect food than hurry and disappoint. The spacing allowed each piece to develop its own beautiful crust. This patience over speed approach defined careful cooking. Temperature recovery between batches was the discipline that separated skilled frying from amateur attempts in Black kitchens. After removing finished pieces from the skillet, grandmothers waited for the oil to return to proper heat before adding the next batch. This recovery period took several minutes, but ensured consistent results across all servings. Rushing the next batch into oil that hadn't recovered meant the second round came out greasier and less crispy than the first. Experienced cooks used their bread test again between batches, confirming temperature before proceeding. The waiting time also allowed them to drain finished pieces and prepare the next round for dredging. Children learn that good frying requires rhythm: cook, rest, recover, repeat. This methodical approach meant the last piece tasted as perfect as the first. The draining station setup was practical engineering that Black grandmothers arranged before any frying began. Wire cooling racks set over sheet pans caught dripping grease while allowing air to circulate beneath fried foods, keeping bottoms crispy. Some kitchens used brown paper bags layered with paper towels, the paper absorbing excess fat. The station sat close enough to transfer hot pieces quickly, but far enough from the stove to avoid splatter. Everything was arranged in sequence: raw food on one side, flour station in the middle, frying pan central, and draining area opposite. This assembly line organization prevented cross-contamination and kept workflow smooth. Children helped by replacing saturated papers and monitoring the growing pile of golden chicken. The setup showed how planning ahead made cooking easier. Seasoning the flour right was where Black grandmothers distinguished their fried chicken from everyone else's. Plain flour produced bland coating, but properly seasoned flour created flavor in every bite. The base always included salt and black pepper, but from there, recipes diverged wildly. Some added paprika for color, others used cayenne for heat, garlic powder for depth, or onion powder for savory notes. A few grandmothers kept their blends secret, mixing spices when no one watched and storing pre-made batches in unmarked jars. The seasoning had to be generous enough to taste through the crust, but balanced enough that no single flavor dominated. Children often tried guessing ingredients, learning to identify spices by taste. These personal flour blends became family signatures. The heavy hand with salt was controversial wisdom Black grandmothers applied despite what doctors said. They understood that salt applied before cooking penetrated meat differently than salt added at the table. Generous seasoning on raw chicken hours before frying allowed salt to dissolve into the flesh, enhancing flavor from inside rather than just coating the surface. The buttermilk soak often contains salt too, doubling the penetration. Critics worried about health, but grandmothers argued that deeply seasoned food required less salt overall. The technique also drew out surface moisture, helping flour adhere better and creating crispier crusts. Children grew up eating food that tasted complete without reaching for the salt shaker. This pre-salting approach produces noticeably more flavorful results. Cast iron fish frying mastery required different techniques than chicken, and Black grandmothers adjusted their methods accordingly. Fish cooked faster, needed hotter oil, and demanded gentler handling to prevent delicate flesh from breaking. Catfish fillets got dredged in cornmeal rather than flour, the coarser coating creating distinctive crunch. The oil had to be properly hot. Too cool and coating absorbed the grease. Too hot and it burned before fish cooked through. Grandmothers flipped fish only once using thin spatulas that slid beneath without tearing. Pieces came out when they floated and turned deep golden, usually just 4 or 5 minutes per side. Friday fish fries brought families together, the smell of cornmeal crusted catfish announcing the weekend had arrived. This mastery showed how the same skillet served different purposes. The lid-on steam finish was a technique Black grandmothers used to ensure thick chicken pieces cooked through without burning the exterior. After achieving beautiful golden crust on both sides, the skillet got partially covered, trapping steam that gently finished cooking the interior. The lid stayed slightly ajar to let some steam escape preventing the crust from turning soggy. This method worked especially well for bone-in thighs and drumsticks that needed extra time to reach safe temperature. Without the lid, the outside would blacken before the inside. Finished. Grandmothers monitored carefully, removing the cover during final minutes to re-crisp any softened coating. The technique showed sophisticated understanding of heat and moisture management. Children learned that cooking required constant attention. Skillet gravy from pan drippings was the reward for all that careful frying, and Black grandmothers never let those precious brown bits go to waste. After the last piece of chicken came out, most grease was poured off, leaving a tablespoon or two plus all the flavorful foam stuck to the bottom. Flour went in next, stirred constantly until golden and fragrant. Then came milk or broth, added slowly while scraping up every speck of caramelized goodness. The gravy thickened into something velvety and rich, tasting of everything fried before. Grandmothers adjusted seasoning by taste, adding pepper and sometimes hot sauce. This gravy transformed simple biscuits or rice into complete meals. Children learned the stirring rhythm that prevented lumps. Nothing from that skillet went unused. The two-skillet system was how Black grandmothers managed large batch frying without sacrificing quality. One skillet held actively frying food while the second preheated to receive the next batch. When the first pan needed temperature recovery, the second was already at perfect heat. This rotation kept production continuous and consistent, cutting total cooking time significantly. Both skillets required attention, monitoring temperature, adjusting flame, timing flips, but experienced cooks developed rhythm that made it look effortless. The system worked especially well during family gatherings when 20 or 30 pieces needed frying. Children watched the choreography of grandmothers moving between pans, understanding that efficiency came from preparation. This method showed sophisticated kitchen management. Cleaning cast iron properly was knowledge Black grandmothers guarded fiercely, horrified when visitors reached for dish soap. The skillet was cleaned while still warm, wiped with paper towels to remove food particles and excess grease. Stubborn bits got scraped with a flat spatula, never abrasive scrubbers that stripped seasoning. If water was needed, it was minimal and followed immediately by a thorough drying over low heat to prevent rust. While the pan was still warm, a thin layer of oil was rubbed across the surface, maintaining seasoning until next use. This routine took seconds, but preserved pans for generations. Children learned that cast iron required different care than other cookware. The cleaning ritual was as important as cooking itself. Hot sauce integration techniques varied among Black grandmothers, each having preferred methods for adding heat without overwhelming other flavors. Some added Louisiana-style hot sauce directly to the buttermilk soak, letting vinegar and pepper infuse the meat over hours. Others mixed cayenne into seasoned flour, distributing heat evenly across the crust. A few brushed hot sauce onto finished pieces while still glistening from the fryer. The goal was layered heat that built gradually rather than assaulting the tongue. Children with sensitive palates got milder pieces, while adults enjoyed versions that made foreheads sweat. Regional preferences influenced choices. Some families favored vinegar-based sauces, while others preferred thicker pepper blends. This customization showed how basic technique adapted to different tastes. The wire whisk alternative was actually a fork in most Black kitchens, grandmothers preferring the simple tool over fancy equipment. Forks beat eggs for dredging, mixed batters, and stirred gravies with surprising efficiency. The tines created enough turbulence to blend ingredients without a whisk's bulk. Grandmothers could feel texture through the fork handle, knowing when batter reached proper. Consistency by resistance alone The fork required no special storage and cleaned easily. Children learning to cook started with forks because they were familiar and less intimidating. This preference for simple tools reflected broader kitchen philosophy. Skilled hands mattered more than expensive equipment. The fork proved that generations of perfect fried chicken came from technique rather than tools. Egg wash for extra crunch was the technique Black grandmothers used when regular dredging wasn't enough. Between the buttermilk soak and the flour coating, pieces got dipped in beaten egg that created an additional binding layer. This extra step meant the flour adhered more completely and built up thicker, creating crunchier crust that stayed intact longer. Some grandmothers did double dips, flour, then egg, then flour again, building armor-like coating. The egg also contributed to deeper golden color during frying, making the finished pieces look as good as they tasted. This technique took extra time and dirtied more dishes, so it was reserved for special occasions when appearance and texture mattered most. Children noticed the difference immediately, the extra crunch announcing something special had been made. The thermometer-free kitchen was standard in Black households where grandmothers relied entirely on senses developed over decades. Oil temperature was judged by shimmer, smoke, and the behavior of test pieces. Meat doneness came from touch, sound, and visual cues rather than internal readings. These women had fried thousands of chickens and knew exactly when pieces were done by how they felt when prodded, how the sizzle sounded, how the crust looked. This intuitive cooking seemed like magic to children, but was accumulated experience. Grandmothers could adjust for different stoves, varying pan weights, and changing humidity without conscious calculation. The knowledge lived in their hands and ears. Modern cooks rely on gadgets, but these women proved attentive practice created its own precision. Pork chop, frying variations showed how Black grandmothers adapted chicken techniques for different proteins. Bone-in chops got the same buttermilk soak and seasoned flour treatment, but required different timing because pork needed thorough cooking. The meat was pounded thin sometimes, ensuring even cooking and tender results. Thicker chops got the lid-on steam finish to cook through without burning. Some grandmothers dredged pork in cornmeal instead of flour, creating rustier, crunchier coating. Others smothered fried chops in onion gravy after initial crisping. The cast iron handled pork beautifully, developing fond that made exceptional gravy. Children learned that mastering one protein meant understanding principles that transferred to others. The morning after reheat was how Black grandmothers restored leftover fried chicken to near original glory. Cold chicken went into a cast iron skillet over medium-low heat with no added oil, the residual fat in the coating providing enough lubrication. The pan was covered loosely, allowing gentle heat to warm meat through while the bottom crisped against iron. After several minutes, pieces were flipped to crisp the other side. This method avoided microwave sogginess and conventional oven drying. Children would wake to chicken sizzling again, knowing breakfast would be special. The technique worked because cast iron's even heat distribution prevented scorching while restoring crunch. This second-day preparation sometimes rivaled the original, proving good technique extended beyond initial cooking. Teaching the next generation was how cast iron knowledge survived, Black grandmothers bringing children into kitchens to learn by doing rather than reading. Young hands felt proper batter consistency, watched oil reach perfect temperature, heard the sizzle that meant everything was working. Lessons came through stories while cooking. Why this seasoning, where that technique originated, who first taught it. Children started with simple tasks like shaking the flour bag, graduating to flipping pieces as skills developed. Mistakes were corrected gently, successes praised generously. The cast iron skillet itself was often promised to the child who showed most dedication. This transfer created continuity across generations, ensuring techniques perfected in the 1950s survive today. The kitchen became classroom. Buttermilk soaking was a transformative technique that tenderized tough proteins while creating superior coating adhesion. African American cooks discovered that acid in buttermilk broke down muscle fibers in chicken and pork, producing remarkably tender results after frying. Soaking time varied by protein, with chicken often submerged overnight while smaller pieces required only a few hours. Beyond tenderizing, buttermilk created a tacky surface that grabbed flour and held it firmly throughout frying. Some families added hot sauce directly to the buttermilk bath, allowing flavors to penetrate deep into meat before cooking. The technique was especially valued for older chickens or tougher cuts needing help becoming tender. Buttermilk soaking became so essential that many cooks considered this step non-negotiable for proper soul food.
How cakes with butter and sugar were the sweet breakfast treat that felt almost like dessert, even though they came from the simplest ingredients in the pantry. Made from cornmeal batter poured onto a hot skillet, each cake sizzled as it spread, forming a crisp edge and soft center that tasted perfect every single time grandparents would flip them with practiced ease, stacking them high and spreading butter that melted instantly into the warm surface. A sprinkle of sugar added just enough sweetness to make the hoe cakes feel like a special morning indulgence. They were quick, affordable, and comforting. The kind of food that made children sit down fast and quiet at the table. Hoe cakes were history and home all at once, a dish born from necessity that became a beloved tradition. Even now, the memory of that buttery sweetness lingers in the minds of anyone lucky enough to grow up with them. Buttermilk biscuits with cane syrup brought the warm fragrance of the Southern kitchen to every African-American breakfast table in the 1970s, where weekend mornings began with the sound of dough being patted and folded by hand. The biscuits rose tall and flaky as they baked in heavy pans, their buttery layers puffing into golden clouds. Cane syrup, boiled from freshly pressed sugarcane juice, added a deep, smoky sweetness that no ordinary syrup could match. Families kept jars of the thick amber syrup in the pantry, ready to drizzle over steaming biscuits straight from the oven. Some cooks stirred a little butter into the syrup for a glossy glaze, while others left it pure and strong to balance the biscuit's delicate crumb. Hot water cornbread breakfast cakes were the quick morning version of a beloved staple that had already lived lifetimes in African-American kitchens. A bowl of cornmeal mixed with boiling water created a dough that came together almost instantly, proving that good food did not need complicated steps or expensive supplies. Grandparents shaped the dough with their hands, patting each cake gently before laying it into the skillet where it sizzled and tightened into a crisp golden edge. These smaller breakfast cakes were eaten warm, often with a smear of jam, a drizzle of honey, or just a little butter melting across the top. The texture was dense but soft, hearty but still light enough to enjoy early in the morning. It tasted like home, like tradition, like something passed down not through written recipes but through practiced hands that knew exactly how the batter should feel. These cakes made mornings easier, faster, and far more delicious than anyone expected from such simple ingredients. Children loved them because they felt like little treats, bite-sized comforts that fit perfectly into small hands. Adults loved them because they stretched the pantry and kept everyone fed without fuss or cost. Hot water cornbread breakfast cakes were proof that a skillet, some cornmeal, and a steady hand could create something unforgettable day after day. Brown sugar sweet grits offered a playful twist on the classic savory staple, transforming stone-ground corn into a kid-friendly morning treat. Grits were cooked slowly in milk or water until creamy, then stirred with butter and a generous spoonful of dark brown sugar. The sugar melted into the hot grains, creating a caramel-like sweetness that balanced the subtle corn flavor. Families sometimes added raisins, sliced bananas, or a sprinkle of cinnamon for extra indulgence, while others enjoyed the simple pairing of butter and sugar alone. This sweet version of grits became popular in households where children preferred a hint of dessert for breakfast, yet adults appreciated its nourishing heartiness. Brown sugar sweet grits demonstrated how one ingredient could shift from savory to sweet with a few thoughtful touches, proving that a Southern classic could adapt to changing tastes while staying rooted in tradition and comfort. Each steaming bowl brought smiles to the table and warmth that lingered long after the meal.
Flour dredging methods in 1960s soul food kitchens went far beyond simple coating techniques. Cooks understood that the odd way flour adhered to meat determined the entire texture of the finished crust. The process began with patting proteins completely dry, as any moisture created steam pockets, preventing adhesion. Flour was seasoned heavily with salt, pepper, and paprika, then spread across shallow pans, allowing pieces to turn without crowding. The dredging motion was deliberate, pressing flour firmly into every crevice before shaking off excess with controlled wrist flicks. Many cooks double-dredged, returning pieces to flour after brief rests to build thicker crusts. Some families kept dedicated dredging flour that accumulated seasoning over multiple uses. These methods produced crusts that shattered while clinging to moist meat beneath.
Hot links with mustard gravy turned an ordinary morning into a bold feast of spice and tang, filling kitchens with the smoky perfume of seasoned sausage. Spicy, smoked hot links were seared until their skins blistered and juices sizzled, releasing a deep aroma that promised hearty flavor. Pan drippings were whisked with flour, broth, and sharp mustard to create a velvety gravy that carried both heat and brightness. Poured over slices of toast or spooned onto fluffy biscuits, the gravy soaked in and balanced the sausage's fire with a gentle tang. Some families added diced onions or a splash of vinegar for extra bite, while others sprinkled chopped parsley for freshness. This dish offered more than simple comfort. It was a statement of taste and tradition, celebrating the spice-loving side of Southern cooking. Hot links with mustard gravy reminded everyone at the table that breakfast could be daring and unforgettable, turning a cold morning into a lively gathering of smoky flavors and warm conversation.
Before any oil touched the skillet, grandmothers would heat the empty pan slowly over low flames, allowing iron to warm evenly and release moisture from its pores. This process took 20 minutes of gradual heating before fat was added. The preheated iron created a frying surface that sealed batters instantly rather than allowing them to absorb excess grease. Families passed down specific instructions about when the pan was ready, often describing the moment when a water drop danced and evaporated within seconds. Many cooks wiped the heated surface with cloth dipped in lard to reinforce seasoning before each use. These rituals created non-stick surfaces that no modern coating could ever match.
Cold cornbread and milk was often called the poor man's cereal, but it was more than a label. It was a lifeline. Day-old cornbread, often too dry to eat on its own, was crumbled into bowls and covered with milk or buttermilk, creating a filling meal that could be eaten quickly before school or work. For children, it was breakfast. For adults, it was sometimes supper, proving its versatility. It carried a tangy, comforting flavor that became familiar in many Southern households. What made it special was not the taste alone, but the reminder that nothing was wasted, not even stale bread. In communities with little to spare, this dish represented survival and practicality. Cold cornbread and milk was part of the rhythm of daily life, a dish that carried generations through hard times and into mornings of determination. Even with its simplicity, it gave people what they needed to keep going during days that demanded courage and endurance. Buttered hominy with bacon brought a smoky, buttery aroma to African-American breakfast tables of the 1970s, turning a humble grain into something rich and satisfying. White hominy kernels were simmered until tender, then sautéed in a heavy skillet with generous pats of butter. Crumbled strips of crisp bacon were folded in at the end, their savory fat blending with the buttery corn for layers of flavor. Some cooks added a sprinkle of black pepper or a pinch of red pepper flakes to deepen the taste, while others stirred and chopped green onions for brightness. Served alongside scrambled eggs or spooned over fresh cornbread, it offered hearty comfort that stuck with you through the morning. Buttered hominy with bacon celebrated both farm tradition and kitchen creativity, honoring a food once central to Native American diets and embraced by Southern cooks. Each bite carried the essence of smoky bacon and sweet corn, proving that simple, affordable ingredients could create a breakfast that felt luxurious without being complicated or costly. Fried cornmeal mush with syrup was one of those breakfasts that quietly carried families through the hardest decades, long before boxed cereal took over the mornings. A pot of mush would be cooked and thickened the night before because nothing could go to waste, and cornmeal was one of the cheapest staples you could rely on. By sunrise, it would be firm enough to slice, each piece hitting the skillet with that gentle hiss that meant breakfast was truly beginning. The outside browned until crisp, while the inside stayed soft, warm, and steady, making every bite feel both hearty and familiar. When syrup was poured over those golden slices, it turned the humble dish into something sweet and comforting, the kind of sweetness that did not need to be fancy to feel special. Grandparents made this because it filled bellies, stretched ingredients, and tasted like something far richer than it really was. Children did not think about thrift or struggle, they just knew it tasted like love served on a plate. Fried mush might look simple today, but its roots run deep in memory, in resilience, in the way older generations held families together one skillet breakfast at a time. Even now, one bite brings back chilly mornings, warm kitchens, and the soft scrape of a metal spatula flipping a slice just right.
Lard rendering and storage techniques were essential knowledge that determined the quality of every fried dish coming from African American kitchens. Families acquired fresh pork fat from local butchers, cut it into small cubes, and cooked it slowly over the lowest heat for hours. The process required constant attention, stirring regularly to prevent scorching, while fat liquefied into pure white liquid gold. Once rendered, lard was strained through cheesecloth multiple times to remove crackling remnants that could burn during frying. Storage was equally precise, with families keeping rendered lard in ceramic crocks or glass jars in cool cellars where it remained fresh for months. Some households added salt to extend shelf life. This homemade lard produced fried foods with flavors that commercial shortenings could never duplicate.
Banana pecan. Quick bread filled homes with the warm fragrance of ripe fruit and toasted nuts, offering a moist and hearty slice that worked as both breakfast and snack. Overripe bananas were mashed into a batter of flour, butter, and eggs, ensuring natural sweetness and tender texture. Chopped pecans folded through the mixture added a gentle crunch and a rich, nutty flavor that deepened as the loaf baked. Some families added a splash of vanilla or a pinch of cinnamon for extra aroma, while others left the recipe pure and simple. Sliced thick and served warm with a pat of butter, banana pecan quick bread made busy mornings feel a little more indulgent without requiring elaborate preparation. It became a beloved treat in African American kitchens, where thrift and flavor often went hand in hand. This bread proved that everyday ingredients, when combined with care, could produce a breakfast that felt special and comforting, filling kitchens with the scent of love and tradition.
The smoke point test was a visual skill that separated novice cooks from masters of the fryer. Before kitchen thermometers became common, African American cooks learned to read oil temperatures through careful observation. They watched for the first wisps of smoke rising from the surface, knowing this indicated peak frying temperature. Too little heat meant soggy, grease-soaked food, while too much smoke meant burnt coatings and bitter flavors. Experienced cooks developed intuition for the exact shimmer and movement of properly heated oil, describing the moment when the surface seemed alive with tiny ripples. This knowledge, passed through demonstration, rather than written instruction, with mothers guiding daughters to recognize subtle visual cues. Mastering the smoke point test guaranteed perfectly golden fried foods every time.
Hoppin John morning bowl carried the luck and legacy of the South into every spoonful, blending black-eyed peas, fluffy rice, and smoky bacon for a meal steeped in tradition. Peas were simmered until tender with onions, garlic, and a hint of pork, then spooned over freshly cooked rice so the savory juices soaked into every grain. A sprinkle of green onions or a splash of pepper vinegar added brightness, while some cooks stirred in diced peppers for extra color and flavor. This dish had long been served on New Year's Day for prosperity, but in the 1970s, many African-American families enjoyed it year-round as a hearty breakfast. It offered protein, fiber, and deep flavor that sustained workers and school children alike. Hoppin John morning bowl reminded each generation of the history carried in its ingredients, from West African roots to Southern kitchens, proving that food could nourish both body and spirit while keeping cultural memory alive with every bite of smoky, satisfying goodness.
Which cast iron technique do you remember from your grandmother's kitchen? Drop it in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more forgotten cooking wisdom.